Okay, let's just dive right in with a wild idea. What if our reality isn't the real reality? What if it's just a compressed file, kind of like a low-res copy of something way, way more complex? Well, that's the big idea behind something called HERT compression theory, and we are going to unpack it right now. Have you ever really thought about how a giant 4K movie can stream so smoothly to your tiny phone? It's all about compression, right? The system keeps the absolute essential data to make the picture look good, and, well, it throws the rest away. Hertz theory basically says, what if the universe is doing the exact same thing? What if it's compressing some mind-bogglingly complex, higher dimensional reality down into the 3D worlds that you and I see every day? All right, so here's the game plan. First, we'll look at this higher dimensional source code. Then, we'll see how the compression actually starts. We'll talk about the price the universe has to pay for creating all this order. Next, we'll get into what a lossy and forking reality means. And finally, we'll see how the universe does its final bookkeeping to make it all add up. Okay, section 1, a higher dimensional source code. We're trying to understand the raw file of reality itself, so let's start with that raw file. And get this, the theory kicks off with a really wild premise, that our 3D world is nothing more than a projection. The real deal, the uncompressed master file, so to speak, exists in something they call a source manifold. Just think of it as a space with way more dimensions and just an insane amount of information that we can't even begin to see. Now, before we go any further, there's one key idea we've got to get our heads around: entropy. You've probably heard of it, but just think of it as a measure of disorder or randomness. So, a perfectly stacked bookshelf, that's low entropy. That same pile of books thrown all over the floor, that's super high entropy, right? Because there are way more ways for it to be messy than to be neat. And here's the crucial part. A high entropy system, that messy room, actually needs more information to describe where every single thing is. So the whole goal of compression is to take that mess and reduce the entropy to create a simpler, more organized picture. All right, section 2, the compression event begins. This is all about how reality gets focused. So the big question is, how does the universe go from that incredibly messy high-entropy source file to the orderly reality we see? Well, it all kicks off with something called a compression event. This is literally the moment the cosmos decides what to focus on and gets ready to hit the render button. And it seems to happen in 3 basic steps. Let's just walk through them. First, you've got the trigger. This is an observation. Literally, the act of you looking at something can be the trigger. It's like telling the universe, hey, render this part for me. Second comes the projection. All that super complex source data gets, well, squished down onto our 3D canvas. And this collapses a ton of information. And finally, maybe the most important step, selection. The system has to choose what's the important signal and what's just noise. By tossing out all that noise, it dramatically slashes the amount of information, the, cosmic bandwidth, that's needed to keep our reality running. Okay, section 3, paying the price for order. Because yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But here's the catch. All that information that got thrown out, all that noise, it doesn't just poof, disappear. Creating this nice, clean, orderly 3D world we live in actually comes at a cost. You know the saying, there's no free lunch? Well, that apparently applies to the entire universe. To create order right here, you have to pay a price somewhere else. So, what is this cost? Well, first, there's encoding. Just stabilizing the new, simpler pattern costs energy, but the real bill comes from the erasure. See, according to the laws of thermodynamics, we're talking the second law here. You can't just delete information for free. Erasing it actually generates heat. So all that chaos, all that disorder from the noise that got thrown away has to be exported. It has to go somewhere, and it goes radiating out into the rest of the universe as more entropy, more disorder. And I want to be super clear, this isn't just a metaphor. This is real physics. A thing called Landauer's principle actually tells us the exact minimum cost. Erasing just one single bit of information at room temperature releases this absolutely tiny amount of energy as heat. It's almost nothing, right? But hold on. Now imagine the trillions upon trillions of bits being thrown away every single second just to render the room you're in right now. Suddenly, that tiny, tiny number starts to add up to something, well, cosmic. And this really shows you the two sides of that cosmic coin. On the information side, you lower the entropy, right? That means less information to store. And the result is a simpler reality that needs way less bandwidth. Awesome. But then you look at the thermodynamic side. Landauer's principle kicks in, and erasing all that unused info costs energy and generates heat. The result? You get an increase in heat and disorder out there in the environment. It's the perfect trade-off. A simpler representation here is paid for by making things messier over there. So let's move on to section 4, a lossy forking reality. Let's talk about the consequences of all this. I mean, what does it mean to pay this cosmic price? Well, this whole compression process isn't perfect. It's what's known as lossy, and that has some really profound effects on the reality we think we know. The biggest consequence is that this compression is lossy. I love this analogy. Think of our 3D world as being like a receipt from a store. It proves the transaction happened, sure, and it shows you the final total. But it doesn't list every single item that was in the store, right? You can't take that receipt and reconstruct the entire store from it. And that's the point. You can't use our 3D reality to reconstruct that original higher dimensional master recording because too much information was just tossed out, gone forever. Now, this isn't just some philosophical thought experiment. The theory actually predicts real, observable clues, signatures we could potentially look for. Things like more predictable structures out there in the cosmos than we'd expect. Or maybe we could detect that compensating increase in heat or random noise somewhere. It even points to the possibility of forking, where multiple different outcomes could spring from the same source. And maybe, just maybe, there could be memory echoes, faint traces of that irrecoverable lost information. Okay, last section, the universe's final bookkeeping. How does it balance this cosmic ledger? So let's recap. We've got lossy compression, a cosmic price tag, some pretty strange side effects, and it all leads to this one final, really elegant idea. The universe is the ultimate bookkeeper. It's always making sure its accounts are perfectly balanced. And man, this quote just nails it. You pay for the local reduction in entropy by exporting disorder elsewhere, which is precisely why the 3D render needs less bandwidth but is lossy compared to the higher D master. That's it. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. It's the ultimate trade. We get our simple, low-bandwidth reality, but it comes at the cost of being an imperfect copy, and the universe foots the bill by making more chaos somewhere else. And here's the math that holds it all together. Now, don't let the symbols freak you out. This is just simple cosmic accounting. It's saying that the change in entropy here in our 3D world, plus the change out in the environment, plus the change back in that original higher dimensional source, all of that has to add up to be 0 or more. It can never be a negative number. Put it this way, you absolutely cannot create order in our world without creating an equal or even greater amount of disorder somewhere else to pay for it. The universe's books always balance. So, that leaves us with one last, kind of mind-blowing question to chew on. If our reality really is just a compressed file, what information got left out? What essential truths, what unbelievable details about the nature of everything were left on the cosmic cutting room floor? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.